Welcome everyone to the Community Association's debate in the Ottawa Centre riding in the provincial election. It is a thrill to have this many people crowding a room to ask questions of their candidates and to hear from them as well. Besides the ones we have on stage, who I'll introduce in a moment, we have a number of other candidates who have set up tables around the side. They'll be happy to hear from you and talk to you after the debate. Up on stage, we have three candidates. We have Simon Beckett for the Greens. We have Thomas Simpson for the Liberals. We have Catherine McKenney for the New Democrats. The organizers invited Scott Healy for the Progressive Conservatives, but he declined, pleading another engagement. The tables have been given to Cashton Perry of the Communist Party, Shannon Boschy of the Ontario Party, Josh Rackless, who's running as an independent, and Maria D'Souza of the New Blue Party. As you know, the way this is going to work is that the vast bulk of this evening is going to be devoted to your questions, those submitted online and on cards. There are people circulating. If you think of one and want to write one down, they have the cards. You write them down, you give them to them, and they're being sort of vetted and compiled by a crew in the corner so that we can get as wide a sample as possible. We are going to begin, though, with opening statements from the candidates. We drew backstage, and they each get 2 minutes to begin. And the first to make an opening statement is Catherine McKenney from the New Democrats. Take it away.
Thank you, David, and good evening, everyone. My name is Catherine McKenney. I am a former city councillor next door in Somerset Ward, and also the co-founder of City Shapes, which is a nonprofit working with cities on transit, housing homelessness, climate action, and good governance. I have a proven record of fighting for housing, transit, healthcare, and community resilience. As a councillor, I pushed for public inquiry into our failing LRT system. I led the charge to declare a housing and homelessness emergency, the first one in the country, and stood up against the trucker convoy that occupied our downtown. This is the type of action I will bring on your behalf to Queen's Park. Today, Ontarians are struggling with growing and persistent healthcare crisis, a housing and homelessness emergency, and skyrocketing costs. Now I'm running to represent you at Queen's Park as your MPP to fight for guaranteed access to a family doctor and reduction in ER wait times, thousands of new permanently affordable homes and rent and vacancy control so that renters have certainty in their housing costs, deep investments in our transit systems here in Ottawa, and investments in our education so that our kids can thrive in well-funded schools. I fought for you as a city councillor, and I'll fight for you at Queen's Park. And I look forward to tonight's discussion. Thank you all for being here. Thank you.
Next to make an opening statement, Simon Beckett for the Green Party.
Good evening, everyone. It's fantastic to be back here in the Glebe Community Centre. This actually is a wonderful full circle moment for me. So before I even get into introductions, I'm going to give you a short backstory. I am an artist. I'm a business owner. I started actually as a dancer teaching right here in this facility in 2013, in that room right up there. I'm a little excited to have the music pumping tonight. It really brings it back home. So a little about me. I've been a long-time Ottawa resident, moving here in 2011 to go to Algonquin College. I've since moved. I've lived in Ottawa West Nepean, Ottawa Vanier, and I currently live technically in Ottawa Vanier. I live in Sandy Hill with my partner. However, living in Sandy Hill, I believe I experience and connect with the Ottawa Centre community even more with the issues that we're all struggling. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a career politician. I'm not somebody who's been on an esteemed board of directors. I am, however, a small business owner. I am an employer. I'm an artist. I'm a concerned community member. I'm a landlord. I'm also a renter. I drive a gas vehicle. I'm a typical resident who's looking at the state of our world, and I've said enough is enough. I'm looking to stand up for the individuals here in Ontario, for sustainability, for housing, for our economy. And I'm looking forward to discussing this further with you tonight. Thank you very much.
And let's hear from Thomas Simpson from the Liberal Party.
Good evening, everyone. Can everyone hear me okay? Wonderful. First and foremost, thank you so much for the community associations for putting this on today. This really is democracy in action, and I'm so excited to be here. And thank you, David, for making sure we are answering our questions. And yeah. For the last 10 years, I have been working to try and make our society a better place, whether that's as a former public servant or in the nonprofit space. I have helped people with disabilities to have a voice so they can be heard and taken seriously by government about the things that they need to have a better life. I have helped people who are blind or low vision to get a job because they deserve one and they can do that work. But honestly, for the past 7 years, I have been hitting my head against a wall because this current government does not care about our most vulnerable. They've not done anything to try and help those who are living in poverty, those who are living on our street, or those people with disabilities. And that's exactly why I'm running. And I'm so proud and excited that we have, I think, the most practical and ambitious plan with the Ontario Liberals and Bonnie Crombie. A plan that's not only going to help our most vulnerable, but I guarantee every single one of you here in this room to make sure that you have a family doctor, to make sure life is more affordable for you, and that we can invest more for you. I'm Thomas Simpson. I'm running to be your MPP because I believe it's time for new leadership and real action to make sure that our priorities here in Ottawa Centre actually make it to Queen's Park. I'm really excited to be here tonight and to listen to all 70 questions that we have in front of us. Thank you.
And we do have a big pack of questions, but nothing like enough. Please submit more, the more the better. I think we're going to start with a kind of a healthcare section, which is something that I'm sure you've all given a lot of thought to. I'm going to start, put the same question to each of you in turn, but I'm going to start with Simon Beckett and then sort of loop around. And it's a question about the shortage of primary care physicians. Diagnose the problem, and what do you prescribe as the solution? Why don't we have enough, and what would you do about it?
Fantastic. All right, so this is an issue that I recently got to experience near and dear to my heart. I am one of the lucky few who does have a family doctor, and I recognize my place of privilege with that. However, there are many issues within the current system. Recently, actually, back in November, my partner was involved in a car accident. Luckily, she was okay, but we did get to experience the wonderful wait times at our hospitals. And this was overnight, so this is not during their peak periods, and we waited 15 hours to be seen. I can't imagine for somebody else who was more injured, who was in a situation more dire than her. It really hit home. And I'm tired of underfunding of our healthcare system, of inaction, of not only the current government, but previous governments, because this is not an issue that is new. We've been talking about healthcare for years, and we need some true leadership. And it means making tough choices and changes within our current system and the design of that. So as Greens, we are looking to hire 3,500 family doctors to get everyone a family doctor within the next 3 to 4 years. Now, that's an ambitious plan.
You're out of time, but I think you're going to get a chance to talk about healthcare more.
Great.
Thomas Simpson, the shortage of family doctors. Why don't we have enough, and what would you and your party do about it?
This is an issue that has been hitting home for me, and quite honestly has been coming up the most at the doors when I'm talking to people across Ottawa Centre. 2.5 million people in this province don't have a family doctor. In Ottawa Centre, that's 27,500. And I don't know about you, but I think that's appalling, and we need to fix it. I'm proud that the Ontario Liberals have actually put out a practical and ambitious plan to ensure that everybody in this province has health care in the next 4 years. We're going to invest $3.1 billion to ensure we get 3,100 doctors in that time. And that means ensuring that we're investing into training and retaining of our doctors, opening up 2 new medical schools, expanding the residency we have at our current medical schools, and appropriately expediting the training and the professional care that we have from those foreign internationals who have done the job as well. I think this plan is going to really make a difference, that we can take the burden off of our healthcare system, especially our ERs right now, that are abysmal at trying to make sure that people actually have access to care. People shouldn't have to go to an ER to get care. They should be able to go to their family doctor, and I'm happy to talk about this more tonight.
Catherine McKenney, your turn. Why don't we have enough family doctors, and what would you and your party do?
So we are short in Ottawa, 162,000 doctors, and I know we're going to be able to talk about many different aspects of healthcare, but I'm going to focus on what we can do today to increase the number of doctors. It's one thing to say we're going to, meet everyone's needs. It's another thing to have a plan. And we know that our community health centers in Ottawa, we have some of the strongest community health centers here in Ottawa, and they recently applied to our provincial government to scale up so that there would be more doctors and more nurse practitioners within these centers, and that was declined. There is absolutely no reason why we shouldn't be using the infrastructure that we have. We already trust these community health centers. They are part of our community, and that is what we would do immediately to fund those community health centers so that they can provide the doctors and the nurse practitioners that you need.
That actually feeds nicely into the next question that I was going to ask, which comes from the old Ottawa East Community Association, and it's a question about community health centers. So I'm going to start with you, Catherine, and then go down the table. The question is, would you commit to opening a new community health center, not a family health team or a new drop-in clinic, a full health center in our neighborhood? And how would you ensure meaningful public input into the process of where it goes, deciding where it goes and what would happen there?
Well, the quick answer is absolutely yes. I've been involved with community health centers, community health and resource centers for most of my working life. I know the type of services that they provide into communities, healthcare, social services, addictions, mental health. So absolutely, we need one in every community so that they are meeting the needs of the community. In terms of consultation and understanding, where one would be located. We've done this in the past. I was on the Board of Health when we opened new services at existing community health centers, and it's absolutely critical to understand. We have an Ottawa neighborhood study. We can understand where the services are most needed. Not everyone is affected by the absence of physicians and nurse practitioners across the city, so using that Ottawa neighborhood study and understanding where the greatest needs are in that community.
Simon Beckett, would you commit to opening a new community health center in the neighborhood, and what would public input look like in deciding where it goes?
Absolutely. So I live near the Sandy Hill Community Health Center, so I get to see the important role that it plays within addiction services, mental health supports, community health, sexual health, and more. I'm going to actually be echoing a lot of what Catherine said, unfortunately or unfortunately. The consultation process is really where we can shine. We need to engage not only with the residents, but the people who are unhoused, the people who are using these services, the most Indigenous individuals, minorities. And part of the consultations needs to take their needs and where they are at into consideration. A lot of well-off individuals are already supported by family doctors, so we need to reach the people where they are, and a lot of the time that's going to be on the street level, to be able to get them the services and then be able to apply these services in the locations that they can best be utilized.
Thomas Simpson, open a new community health center, and what does public input into that look like?
So I think this is where having three progressive candidates on the stage, we're going to hear a lot of agreeing with one another, and this may be a bit boring for all of us tonight. Absolutely, yes. We deserve another community health center in Ottawa Centre, end sentence. We need to ensure that we have the resources, and that's why I'm proud that part of our plan ensures that if the Ontario Liberals form a government, that we would have new team-based medical care in each of the Ontario health teams, at least 2 per region. That means, electing strong Liberal candidates like myself so we can fight to ensure that we have it in our community here. That means not only having access to a family doctor, but a nurse practitioner, a nurse, social workers, and system navigators. And these, I think, are the real heroes of community health teams so that people understand what our system actually means. Because I don't know about you, it's complicated and it's complex, and it doesn't work for someone when they're not feeling themselves 100%. When it comes to consultation, I think the answer is simple. We need to make sure that what concerns that people have in our community are actually addressed. None of this, oh yes, we'll think about it. It actually needs to ensure that we're working together in tandem to make sure our needs are respected.
The next question is about long-term care, different part of the health system. I'm going to put it to Simon Beckett first, Catherine McKenney, and Thomas Simpson, and you'll get to kick off the question after that, Thomas. The question is that the idea is that having long-term care beds in very large institutions is often not what seniors who need that kind of care actually want. They'd prefer smaller home-type models. What is your party proposing to do about creating a long-term care system that'll meet the needs of older citizens who do need to live in supportive care? Simon?
Great. So the Greens are quite clear on this. We need to move away from a model of for-profit care. And this specifically, we are talking about long-term care. When we were facing the pandemic, the hardest hit places were long-term care homes. I guarantee there's somebody in here who lost a loved one or was directly impacted by the inadequate protections that individuals in long-term care were experiencing. So Greens, we are going to be funding by 2029 over 48,000 new long-term care facility spaces. Now, these are not large institutions, because when we look at a for-profit model, these are typically these large buildings. We're piling a lot of people into one space. That's not conducive to a respectful living environment. So we're looking to lower the amount of people each individual nurse is taking care of, and place these long-term care facilities in local communities to blend them in to our current society, so they're not a place to leave people, that they can still be a part of the community.
Catherine?
Yes, well, when I was on council, I was fortunate to work with community members to push for the city to put in place in our long-term care centers what is called a butterfly model. It's probably best known as a butterfly model, and it's that person-centered model for long-term care. So it does mean, more staff, more nurse-to-patient ratio, but it also means taking care of people in the spaces that they are most comfortable in and that they have good memories from. So that is absolutely key. It is something that I would carry with me to Queen's Park. At the same time, the province really needs to take more, fund more of our long-term health care within cities. Leaving it up to municipalities means that we just are not meeting the needs of people.
Thomas Simpson, what would your party do to build more long-term care, and what do you think about smaller homes rather than larger ones?
So my grandfather lived in Hamilton. Him and his wife, my step-grandmother, both got quite ill at the same time, to the point where they both had to live in separate long-term care facilities. And he was not doing great. But the care that he received at long-term care, the medical help, the ancillary medical, the peer support and recreation he received, his quality of life improved drastically, to the point where we're pretty sure his last 8 lives, or years of life living there, were some of his best. That is a lucky, lucky story, and I'm sure one that many people can't relate to. And that is the problem, because I want to make sure that those who are living in a long-term care facility live in one like my grandfather did. That he was, the mayor of the home he lived at. He got good food, he was taken care of. The problems we had in the pandemic, we've only put a Band-Aid over those issues. They are still there, and they are not as prevalent as they once were. We need to fix that and ensure that we can end the privatization, that we can ensure that people who are living in these homes are living with decency and respect, and that they are living out their last few years with as much hope and optimism as they deserve.
We're going to move on to talk about housing, another big, difficult question. And Thomas, I'll start with you, then Simon, then Catherine. And this question is from the Centretown Community Association, and it is, what would you do to increase affordable housing of all types, including deeply affordable, family-sized, and supportive housing for those in greatest need? So what do you do to get more affordable housing and a mix of affordable housing?
Great. I was really pleased a few weeks ago to actually go to the Centretown Community Association forum on housing and homelessness and listen to the lived experience of people who have not been so fortunate, and to hear the solutions that people have proposed. One thing was very clear to me. We need provincial investment in housing right now because it is dire. It's dire for people who want to own a home, it's dire for first-time home buyers, and it's dire for those who are living on the streets who want a roof over their head badly. We've proposed a plan that will do just that will cut the hidden taxes so that people who are looking to buy a house, especially those who are first-time home buyers, can do so more affordably, to ensure that we're getting rid of development charges on new properties that are under $3,000. But personally, I've been pushing as part of my own local priorities a housing accelerator fund so that co-ops, so that nonprofits and Indigenous-led organizations can have access to capital to buy existing homes now so we can take people off the street and into homes immediately. That's a plan that's going to work as quickly as possible to make sure that we have affordable housing and a roof over people's head now.
Simon Beckett, what do you do to get more affordable housing and a mix of affordable housing?
I will say, if you could find me a home for $3,000 there, I know it was a slip-up, but I'll take it. It's a water bottle, it's fine. 2 minutes is not going to be long enough for this one. So there's a lot that we can do with building housing. And the first thing to recognize is we need all hands on deck. This is not a situation that's going to be solved solely by the government, but nor the private sector. But we need both to be involved to be able to create the housing that we need. There's clearly a supply issue, right? We need to build more homes. So this means we need to increase the availability of homes within our current urban boundaries. Sprawl is not sustainable. Sprawl is not the affordable way to continue growth. We want to allow as a right fourplexes within current lots. So if you owned a plot of land and you would like to develop a secondary dwelling unit in it, you don't have to rezone. That takes time. That takes a lot of energy to do that. So we can accelerate that. Getting the government involved, Greens, we want to build 60,000 supportive housing units with wraparound supports. These are individuals who are struggling with mental health addictions, with substance addictions. So that's not on the backs of private landlords. But we can go further, which I'm out of time right now, so we'll get back to this one.
Catherine, what do you do to promote affordable housing and a good mix of it?
Well, you start by building permanently affordable public housing so that you don't lose it, that it's not gone in 20 years or 30 years. And if it's, sits with a co-op, for example, it becomes more and more affordable over time. So the Ontario New Democrats would build 300,000 new affordable homes. They would also build 60,000 supportive homes so that people coming out of homelessness who need supports, who need those wraparound supports, would have it. We would also build that missing middle, the fourplexes, but most important, we would ensure that our communities are built so that they are mixed income, so that people with low incomes, moderate, and higher incomes can all live together. We no longer build housing where we put people who are all low income into one area. We are doing it now in different parts of Ottawa, Ottawa Community Housing, CCOC, and some of our other great housing providers are doing that, and we would continue to fund that.
So, as a bit of a follow-on to that question, and Simon, I'll start with you, and then Catherine, and then Thomas. One of the reasons that we hear that new housing is unaffordable is development charges. That municipalities charge builders and thus new buyers an awful lot of money on the premise that it's paying for municipal services, but it's become a source of funding for cities. What do you do about that problem?
Great. So we do need to remove the development charges because they are quite excessive. Depending on where you're building inside the Greenbelt, you're looking at about $50,000 in development charges outside of the Greenbelt. So Canada, Stittsville, Barrhaven, you're looking at about $60,000 for development charges. That does not include the cost of tax, and then of course we've got the cost of labor and materials. So cities have been relying on these development charges because they've been underfunded for infrastructure. That means we need to get back into properly funding our cities for infrastructure, so that we can remove these development charges, which is what the Greens want to do. That then can be lowered, cost of housing can be lowered, allowing more individuals to get involved in the housing market. On top of that, Greens are proposing removing the land transfer tax for first-time home buyers. Every little bit helps in this current housing crisis. Now, the province needs to get back into the proper funding for roads, sewers, and the associated infrastructure that is required to have housing. Part of the problem that we have today is we keep sprawling out. It's very expensive to build sprawl. So if we keep sprawling, we are unable to support those properties further and further away, and therefore we cannot lower the cost of housing. So this is why we need to intensify within our current urban boundaries as part of the solution.
Catherine?
Oh, thank you for that. I've thought about this a lot, actually. I was on city council, and we did depend on development charges for, to build the infrastructure for new housing. And of course, if you're looking at, the average cost of a home in Ottawa is something like $660,000, and Simon mentioned it's just around $50,000 for development charges, and that may lower the cost of that single-family home the first time, but as soon as you sell it, that house is no longer affordable. And I've never seen any rationale that would show me that would be passed on from the developer to the home buyer. So there are times when development charges should be waived. Certainly, if you're doing infill, good higher density infill, if you're building affordable housing, but we also need to have a tool. Cities need a tool to stop sprawl. And if we're allowing new development to happen 50 kilometers outside of the city, then that tool is lost if developers are not paying for the cost of their development.
Thomas Simpson, what do you do about development charges?
Yeah, so the Ontario Liberals have said we will scrap development charges on new middle-class houses under 3,000 square feet. And that'll save people, on average, about $170,000. What we'll do is instead create something called the Better Communities Fund, which will be a permanent fund where the province will remit to the municipalities that lost revenue that they would have received. Things on making sure our roads are working, sexy sewage, all that good stuff that money should be going to. What that ensures is that charge that would have gone onto a home buyer will directly go to, will be eliminated, and that the fund that we have developed will go right to the city instead. It ensures that we have more affordable homes for people who are looking to buy, and ensures that municipalities have predictable revenue that otherwise they would have missed out. I think we've seen over and over, past couple of years, cities across this province have been using this as a crutch for their revenue generation to ensure that they can balance their budgets, and that shouldn't be the case. Part of this ensures that we have a new relationship with the province and the municipalities, and having a premier who has been a mayor herself in Bonnie Crombie, I think will help in that. Thank you.
And a question about rent control. And I'll go Thomas, Simon, Catherine on this. Once upon a time, there was no rent control, and then there was rent control in the interest of keeping housing affordable, and then rent control was partly taken off in the interest of getting more housing built. The question is, will your party commit to restoring rent control for all rental units, regardless of when they were first occupied? But also, if so, how would you plan to address the challenges that would come as a result of that? Thomas?
Great. So I have learned so much about rent control and about tenants' rights from my father-in-law, who has continued to rent and has taken up the mantle of fighting for residents in his apartment building to make sure that their life is more affordable. What that has taught me is very clear that people need protection so that rent is not increased exorbitantly just because these large rental owners deem it to be the case. First thing that Doug Ford did when he came into government was end rent control that Liberals had put in. And now it is, I think, more than enough time has passed, and we have heard from more than enough people that this new system is not working. Ontario Liberals will put in phased-in rent control, similar to what we have in other provinces like Manitoba, to ensure that people are protected. But we'll go further than that as well. What I'm proud of is that we'll actually create an emergency rental program for those people who may not be able to make ends meet, who instead will have interest-free loans so that they don't have to worry about trying to make rent and instead being evicted from their homes. I think this is a program that will ensure that people don't have to go to loan sharks and can actually have decent affordability and peace of mind that government has their back.
Simon, rent control, would you restore it? And if so, how would you deal with the consequences of doing it?
Yeah, so rent control is absolutely something that we do need to reinstate for those properties built after November 2018. This is something that we're pretty firm on as a Green Party. There is a place for rent control within the market, and this is something that I get to experience on an everyday basis as a property manager. I have, unfortunately, been the person to deliver the N2s, which are the above guideline or the rent increases that are not subject to rent control. That is part of the job that I signed up for. Now, we need to provide protections to those renters who are currently being gouged and are seeing $400, $500, $1,000 increases to get them to leave their property. It's quite simple, in my opinion. It's as soon as we implement rent control within a 12-month period, as with a current N1, you are subject to the government-mandated restrictions. Currently, it's 2.5% as a max based on inflation. So this amount is determined by the government on a year-over-year basis. So phased in slowly to make sure that people are not suddenly gouged right before, because one of my concerns as a property manager is people, great, now you're going to be subject to rent control, we're going to immediately bump up that rent right before it gets implemented. So it's something that we do need to watch out for as we implement rent control.
Catherine McKenney?
Yes, thank you. So we would immediately put in place rent control for all properties, and not phased in. Talking about Manitoba, that was they actually have a 10-year phase-in. So this would be immediate rent control. We would also put in place vacancy control so that you pay what the last tenant paid. And when I am talking to young people at the doors, anywhere when I'm out and about in the community, it is the number one barrier for them to be able to, save money, to be able to purchase a home, is that they don't have, they don't know what their rent is going to be. They're not able to move, because the rent can be jacked up. 2018 is, like moving further and further away, and so many places have been built since 2018. So we need both vacancy control and rent control so that people know what their monthly costs are going to be.
Let's talk about, shifting gears, an intensely local issue that the Ottawa Centre MPP is going to be involved in, and that's the 417. Runs right through the middle of this riding. And the MTO's 417 bridge replacement plan for the bridge that crosses the canal, it's kind of been all over the place over the years. But the current plan is that it's going to detour traffic on Colonel By and Queen Elizabeth Drive for 2 years. It's going to affect Maine and Hawthorne, Elgin and Argyll. There have been community objections to it, but some of the concerns remain unaddressed. So if you're elected as the MPP, what would you do to push the Ministry of Transportation to revisit the plan? And for extra points, can you give an example of your party acting on an issue like that based on community input? I'll start with Simon Beckett, then Catherine, then Thomas.
Okay, this issue is actually quite interesting because I use that stretch of road nearly on a daily basis, and I'd be one of those residents affected traveling from work back to home and then throughout the community. So the current plan by the MTO, I will be honest, I'm not entirely knowledgeable about the details of it, but one of the things that I look at is instead of shutting down the road completely, what I'd like to see the MTO revisit is a partial deconstruction of it and then a partial rebuild of each side. Instead of shutting everything down completely, this will allow the highway to continue in some fashion while still using the secondary routes in conjunction with that. Unfortunately, I don't have any real examples because we don't have a lot of MPs currently at Queen's Park, but this is something that I've seen done in different communities, specifically where I grew up in Barrie, Ontario, for a similar bridge replacement. So this is something that can be done without the impacts of completely shutting down the highway for 2 years. We can essentially get the best of both worlds.
Catherine?
Well, I had the good fortune of being the city councillor when bridges were shut down in the community that I represented, and I can tell you that it is almost impossible for people who live there to be able to function. You have cut-through traffic, you have intense traffic, and so at the same time, I think there are a couple things that need to be done, and we push for this with MTO. Outside of making sure that the detours are not all concentrated on local roads, we have other ways of getting people through this city without going directly through our downtown. And we can also make sure that the communities that are affected have got good segregated bike lanes, they've got good sidewalks, they've got good pathways, so that the people who live in those neighborhoods, the kids who live in those neighborhoods who have to get to school, can do so safely and can get around their communities. At the same time, pushing that cut-through traffic out into more dispersed areas of the city.
Thomas Simpson, the question is, what would you do to get the Ministry of Transportation to revisit the detour plan for the bridge replacement? And can you give an example of your party acting on community demands like that?
Sure. Let's start with the obvious. This is going to be frustrating, especially after the road repairs that Old Ottawa's have had on Hawthorne, on Main, and on Montcalm. That was a huge headache, something that I've heard very clearly from the folks and residents in Old Ottawa East. What I think is important is ensuring that you have an MPP who can work with government agencies to be your voice effectively. This means making sure that your MPP understands and works with MTO to relay the concerns and frustrations that you have. But more than that, it means ensuring that your MPP, and hopefully in me, that I will be the one to be over-communicative with you on any change that happens. I think the frustration that people have felt in Old Ottawa East with the current road conditions is that there wasn't enough communication from the city. That can't happen again with the bridge replacement currently being planned by MTO. So your MPP needs to be your champion and ensure that your frustrations are heard, over-communicate, and make sure that there are plans in place so that we can mitigate any frustration. I think that it needs to be first and foremost the priority for the next MPP here in Ottawa Centre.
And another 417 question, one I suspect will be a gimme, but constituents want to hear about it. It has to do with noise barriers along the 417, particularly the stretch that goes near Glashan and other stretches near residential properties. Would you support, lobby for, push for installing noise barriers along the entire downtown corridor on the 417? Catherine, Simon, Thomas.
I guess I could just say yes. Absolutely. We've seen that, especially communities that didn't have those noise barriers going through the downtown. In Centretown, we did for years went without. The parts of the Glebe went without. So, absolutely, we need the sound attenuation for residents. It's a growing city. The province, the city. We need more housing. We need to densify, but as we do that, we have to also recognize that there is a major highway cutting through our downtown neighborhoods, and you need those noise barriers all the way across through every community.
Simon?
Yeah, I think we're all going to be responding very similar here. I fully agree. I sleep at night, and if I leave my window open, I can hear the trucks rumbling down, and I live all the way in Sandy Hill North. So I can't imagine, for those who live right next to the highway, how loud that can be, especially without those sound barriers there. So, and I'm a light sleeper. So absolutely, we would support that. But going further, we can now talk about the transit issue here. So part of this is, yes, we need to reduce the noise for the vehicles there, but we also need to look at getting more vehicles off the road. That's part of the problem, is the traffic is already so bad that there's cars, and it sounds like the highway is just as busy at night that it is during the day. So we need to have part of this discussion on top of putting up barriers is to straight up reduce the number of vehicles on the road. And the only way to do that is through robust mass transit. From there, we could even talk about the trucks. Right? That's a huge issue, and that them on their own are a huge contributor of not only pollution, but noise. So that's another way that we need to look at getting these trucks out of our downtown and off our streets, or restricting them at the times that they can go there, considering we only have one highway through downtown and everyone wants to go on it.
Thomas?
I'll be quick on this one. The answer is yes, obviously. I think we not only need new ones, but we need to ensure maintenance of existing sound barriers. When I've been knocking on doors in the Iona neighborhood, this has come up very clearly at the failing sound barriers that are currently happening in that neighborhood. And for some reason, MTO has not come to fix them. This is something that I've already committed to trying to figure out day one, if elected, to make sure that we can repair those, but make sure that we have that infrastructure that can, make sure that the noise is as manageable as possible.
We have a few questions that kind of revolve around the theme of representing Ottawa in different ways and how politics work here. And one of them, the premise of it is that in the past few years, Ottawa's been forgotten about or ignored compared to Toronto or the GTA. Simon, Thomas, then Catherine. How would you represent Ottawa at Queen's Park to make sure that the city is properly attended to?
I am so happy this question got asked. So one of the reasons why I am a member and a supporter of the Green Party is the way our party is set up. We are set up like no other party here. So what I'm referring to is I, as a member of the Green Party, still get to be a local champion for your issues. What I'm referring to is whipping. Every other party, other than the Green Party, whips their MPs to vote in line with their party, even at the expense of the local constituents. So this allows me to actually be a true voice for you as your representative at Queen's Park. Even if the Greens are proposing something that I believe through consultation, through engagement with the community is negatively going to affect them, I don't have to vote in line. I get to vote on your behalf, with your voice, and with your best intentions in mind, not my leader, not Bonnie Crombie, not Doug Ford, not Merritt Stiles, you.
I've already forgotten. Who did I say was next?
I'll go next.
Thomas.
Yeah, thank you. So a fun fact, Ottawa is the second largest city in the province, but I think Premier Doug Ford may have forgotten about that because he seems to forget we exist on a map. He treats us like an outpost. He's not here when we have natural disasters. He was absolutely nowhere to be found during the convoy. He seems to only want to come here in very short increments of time and then jets off without actually speaking about the issues that matter most to us. And I don't know about you, but I'm sick and tired of a premier who ignores us. I think it's wrong and we need to change that. But more so than that, I think that the role here of your MPP is to make sure that they are the representative of you, your concerns and your priorities at Queen's Park, and not the other way around. What I think we've seen so often is that MPs and MPPs become a voice for their parties, and they don't actually have your back here. Why I'm getting involved and why I have stepped up is because I want to be that voice. I want to ensure that we're helping our most vulnerable and that our priorities truly become the province's priorities, because I think we've been missing that in the last 7 years.
And Catherine, how would you represent Ottawa at Queen's Park to make sure that the city's voice is heard? Mm-hmm.
Well, I would, I obviously have got experience in representing people in Ottawa Centre, in the Somerset Ward portion of Ottawa Centre, and I can attest to the fact that, yes, we have a premier that knows little about Ottawa, was skidooing during the convoy. Many of our elected representatives were nowhere to be found. So Ottawa is feeling like it is ignored these days. And what we need to do in order to bring your voice to Queen's Park, we need someone who understands that they have to work across party lines sometimes. They have to ensure that they're working in the best interests of you. And I would do that, I continue to meet with community associations. I would commit to meeting with each of the community associations annually, maybe twice a year, to understand what is happening in the communities, but also just being out and about. I go to events. I am very active in the community. People know who I am, and I would continue to work that way.
Another question, sort of on the same theme. It's about amalgamation and whether it's worked out. Shockingly, I'm old enough to remember amalgamation 25 years ago. And I am also shocked that we're still talking about it now, but apparently we want to. So, Catherine, Simon, and then Thomas, the question is, would you support some form of de-amalgamation of the City of Ottawa?
Yes, so the City of Ottawa amalgamation has not worked. There was a rationale for it in 2000, 2001, and it was essentially to stop sprawl. It was so that we weren't allowing kind of outlying communities to continue to sprawl. Problem is, we got this city of Ottawa, and we continue to sprawl. So there's no good rationale remaining for amalgamation. I think that the city is too large. I think that your concerns and the way, the things that you need in your communities just are not represented. They're not represented at City Hall. They're not represented at the province. So we need to ensure that we have communities of common concern. And I wouldn't go back to maybe 10 municipalities, but I would certainly go back to maybe 2 or 3.
Simon? Hey, sorry, hang on. 2 or 3. What would those look like? Where would you draw those lines?
Yeah, okay, that's a good question, good question. I mean, I think that you would today, leaving out the rural areas for a minute, you would certainly have a center, and then I wouldn't go back to like the old Nepean, old Gloucester, but I would have like an east and west city of
Okay.
some sort.
And then rural beyond that.
Rural, we would need to talk about villages and village character and what the people of rural Ottawa want. People of rural Ottawa have never been happy with amalgamation, and I think it's not to me to tell them what that should look like, but I think that conversation needs to happen.
Okay. Simon? And because I let Catherine go a little longer, you can go longer now if you want, or you can save it up and claim it later if you'd like. And Thomas, you'll get the same chance.
Might save that one. Slightly different opinion. I believe that we should not necessarily deamalgamate. There's a lot of cost that's going to be associated with that. There's going to be a lot of confusion given the fact that we've been like this for so many years. I will admit I wasn't in Ottawa, and I was quite young when that clearly happened at only 32, so 25 years ago I was still in school. Now, saying that, I think there is some conversation to be had about removing some of the rural land areas from Ottawa. So, as you drive through Dunrobin, for example, that's technically part of Ottawa, and that's wild to me. So removing some of those pockets of rural area should be brought to the table, but full deamalgamation, deamalgamation I think is the right term, I don't think it's a good idea. I think we need to, again, improve on the current services within the rural boundary, intensify, stop sprawl, and then improve from there.
Thomas Simpson, do we deamalgamate, and if so, how?
I think we would be hard-pressed, to be quite honest, to find political leaders and premiers who want to start ripping up our cities at this point in time. I think what we need to do instead is start by having a new relationship between the province and municipalities so that the municipalities get the provincial funding that they need, than currently having the problems we exist, where we have a government who's creating bilateral agreements with each city to try and put a Band-Aid over the problems. That's not working. What I'm proud of in our leader, Bonnie Crombie, is that she is a mayor, former mayor of Mississauga, who understands the concerns that each municipality had and the operational constraints that they had. I think someone with that experience who can come to the table as premier can ensure that each municipality is getting what they need in a new relationship with the provincial government, and where appropriate, taking those responsibilities that have grown into the municipalities off of their plate so that we're ensuring that everyone is getting the services that they need. I think that would be a much more pragmatic use of everyone's time and ensuring that we have solutions that work for everyone rather than redrawing the map across the province.
It took 45 minutes, but we found something that a couple of you are like diametrically opposed on.
Keep going, we'll get there.
Yeah. So another gear shift. The stated purpose of this election is to have a government in Ontario that is prepared to deal with Donald Trump and the challenges that he's going to pose. So Thomas, Simon, Catherine, in that order, big picture, what do you think Ontario needs to do to get ready for Donald Trump?
Sure. I'll start with the inevitable. If Doug Ford was serious about dealing with Trump and the tariffs, he would have gotten to work right now instead of plunging us in this unnecessary election in the middle of February. Simple. Instead, what he's doing is gallivanting over to the United States to become friends after he said he was proud that Donald Trump had won the election. And you know what? I don't think he is the best businessman to make sure that we're protecting our economy and our jobs here in Ontario. He tried to get beer quicker into our street corners. What did that cost us? Billions of dollars. He tried to sell off our Greenland and then only backed off when he was caught. He's not a great businessman, folks. He is all smoke and mirrors. What we have with the Ontario Liberals is a plan that I think is going to help. It's exactly what you expect. It's a Team Canada approach to ensure that we're working in lockstep with the provinces and the federal government, ensure that we would fight tariff for tariff if that is what happens, and ensure that we're protecting our local economy by having interest-free loans for small businesses who may be impacted. That's what we need, and that's what we not. That's what we need, and that is what we deserve.
Simon, what do we do to get ready for Donald Trump?
Yeah, so I'm very glad that you did bring up Doug Ford's comment about he wanted Trump to win. I was appalled when I heard that. For somebody saying they're standing up for Canada to essentially go behind our backs and say, actually, I wanted this guy to win is disgusting, in my opinion. This is where I truly think one of the nice things to come out of this situation, if we have a silver lining, is the kind of the patriotic approach that we all seem to be taking. And that's really where the Greens are shining through in that capacity. We want to put together a full bipartisan task force that would include the NDP, that would include the Liberals, and I'll be honest, even the Conservatives, to deal with this issue, because this is something that we need everybody to work on. This is not Greens versus Conservative versus NDP. This is, to get through this, we need to work together to put your best interests first. Now, on top of that, we can approach as a province with a Buy Ontario and a Buy Canada strategy from a governmental level. We can add in business investment tax credits to allow businesses to continue to expand and grow and spend money here to support our economy. And of course, the one that we're all talking about is the interprovincial trade barriers. Let me tell you, I cannot wait to the day that I can get some BC ciders in Ontario, because they are phenomenal. And if you haven't, just wait, just you wait.
That interprovincial trade barriers is going to be my next question. So you can really talk about cider a lot if you'd like. But Catherine McKenney, what should Ontario be doing to prepare for a fight with Donald Trump?
Well, absolutely. Doug Ford is not the negotiator that we need. Doug Ford is not a good negotiator. Doug Ford has proven time and time again that, Canada is not for sale, but he is actually for sale. So sending Doug Ford down with a gaggle of premiers to Washington is actually just a little bit embarrassing right now. What we need is actual strong leadership. And I think that probably our three parties are pretty much the same in terms of an Ontario response. We need to defend our jobs. We need to work with industry. We need to work with the people who will be most affected. Obviously, we need to support people's incomes if they lose it, and we need to open up, as Simon mentioned, interprovincial barriers. It's been tried before, but we have not been in a place where our economy is on the line. We can do it outside of cider. You can't even buy a car seat and put it across the provincial boundary between Ontario and Quebec. It's outrageous, and we've depended on the U.S. as our trading partner for far too long.
So the next question was going to be, name me an interprovincial trade barrier that you think Ontario should knock down. We've heard car seats, we've heard interprovincial trade in alcohol. Thomas Simpson, you haven't named one. I'll give the other two a chance to come up with another if you want. But what's a dumb interprovincial trade barrier that Ontario could just give up on, in your view?
I think there are a number of licensed professionals that have the issue of trying to work in several provinces or go to where the greatest need is. Hairdressers, for example, of one of them. Doctors especially, having to make sure that their professional colleges send notes to each other and back that they can practice and that they have a license. It's administrative burden. It causes a lot more headaches than it needs to. And realistically, we just need to ensure that people can go across the country and practice their profession where the greatest need is. That, I think, is the largest trade barrier that we have currently, other than getting goods and services across our country.
Simon, do you want to talk more about alcohol, or do you want to talk about a different
BC wine.
There's wine. There's great wine in BC too, and Nova Scotia. I'm going to keep it quite short because realistically, you stole mine. But yes, the biggest one in my opinion, on top of goods, is actual services, psychologists, doctors, lawyers. That's to me actually the bigger interprovincial trade barrier, is the inability to practice in different areas of the country. That's something that will require a lot of work to get over, but that's something, that work I believe is important and obtainable. And as a Green, I'm absolutely willing to do that work.
Catherine McKenney, an interprovincial trade barrier that we can do without?
Yeah, I would throw in our electricity grid. I think that it's always, should have always run east-west rather than north-south, and that is something that that we would be very wise to open up and make sure that that energy transfer is going across the country rather than down into the States.
So, speaking of east-west traffic and energy, what about pipelines? People talk about building new pipelines across the country. Technically, it's a federal responsibility, but provinces get a say. Catherine, Thomas, then Simon, what would your view be on a new oil or gas pipeline crossing Ontario to get to the east?
So now is not the time to give up on our climate. Now is not the time to turn our back on the work that we've done. We owe it to each other, we owe it to our kids and our grandkids. So opening up new east-west pipelines is an absolute no. What we need to do is continue to look at good renewable energy and invest in renewable energy. Actually, the province of Alberta had been doing quite well until they elected their last premier. And the investments come with it. When we are investing in good renewables, we get the investment. We get those good green jobs. It's good for the economy. It's good for the environment. And we owe it to each other. We owe it to our children.
Simon?
I think you all know where I stand on this one. But I'm going to speak, I'm actually going to speak over here to Catherine. I was checking out the NDP platform, and I'll be honest, I didn't see a single thing about climate change. I didn't see a single thing about the environment. So as a individual looking to run for government, I think you are neglecting, you're mentioning it here, but if you are representing the NDP as a broader and Merit Styles, there is nothing in your platform that you guys are that are dedicating yourself to actually do. I commend you as an individual. You absolutely, I can understand you've done some great stuff for the city, but if you are representing us at a provincial level, I need to see that from the province, and the NDP is not calling for that right now.
Our rules do allow 30 seconds for responses to direct challenges, so go to it, and then Thomas, you'll get your chance.
So, I mean, the NDP has had several private members' bills over the last 8 years that directly apply to climate action. We are also proposing to invest 50% of operational funding into transit. We're also looking at land use. We know that in cities, the majority of greenhouse gases come from buildings and from transportation. Also, the NDP is supportive of closing down gas plants, not firing them up the way that this current progressive conservative government has done.
Thomas Simpson, your take on building a potential new east-west pipeline to get oil to different markets.
Yeah, I do honestly believe this is largely a federal issue. This is for the federal government to determine whether or not there is a need for this. This is for Natural Resources Canada to do that work and ensure that any potential pipeline goes through our environmental assessment that we have currently, as well as ensuring that we're respecting treaty rights for Indigenous people across this country in Section 35, ensuring that we are going through consultation and accommodation where appropriate. My job as your MPP provincially is to ensure that I'm your voice for your concerns. So if this were to go forward, if a federal government were to do that, my job would to ensure that I'm your voice in saying, yes, no, this is complicated, and relaying that to the appropriate level of government. And I think that is the responsible thing for our MPPs to be doing.
So I'm going to put this next question to Simon, Thomas, then Catherine, and it does have to do with something that Catherine touched on, and that's Ontario's electricity mix. Current government's very keen on nuclear, also is firing up gas plants, as Catherine said. What should Ontario's energy mix look like? Should we go in on nuclear the way we have been? Should we go in on more renewables? What should we do?
Yeah. This is something that I think is really important. That's going to be a hot topic, especially as Doug Ford likes to commit billions and billions and billions of dollars to nuclear. Now, that being said, I'm not anti-nuclear by any means, and I think it's going to play a role in supporting the baseline energy load for many, many years to come. However, the expansion of nuclear is not something that may be in the financial best interest of Ontario. With the proposed new plant that Doug Ford has talked about recently, estimates are putting the cost of that in the hundreds of billions of dollars. With the cost of renewables continuously coming down and getting cheaper, that's where we should be putting our money into. That's where we should be investing in Ontario's electricity grid, not just at a centralized location, but a decentralized electricity grid, allowing individuals to put solar panels, windmills on their own properties, feeding back into the grid and paying them for the energy production. This will, as part of our plan, create climate resilience. So then if there is the continued major storms that we're seeing, we're going to be able to continue powering the grid in localized areas instead of having all the energy coming from one spot. That's what we need to do as part of the green energy transition, not build more gas plants, not build more nuclear, but focus on localized distribution.
Thomas Simpson, what should Ontario's energy mix look like? What should we move towards?
So I worked for the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission, and if anyone wants to get nerd out about nuclear energy and nuclear safety after this, very happy, but I got 2 minutes. So let me say this. We need to ensure that we have an appropriate mix of energy sources in this province, that we are investing in renewables, that we are investing in baseline energy like nuclear. Part of that means investing in future nuclear like SMRs, or small modular reactors, which can be used in rural and remote communities to get those communities off diesel generation, which are causing more greenhouse gas emissions than anything else. I think having an appropriate mix will ensure that we are able to have the energy needs that we want, and as we've already discussed, ensure then that we can figure out how to integrate that east-west with the rest of Canada as part of a response to ensuring that we're really focusing on our country first.
Catherine McKenney, Ontario's energy mix.
Yeah, so I mean, to begin with, we really need to end our reliance on gas plants. We have seen, we were told that the new gas plants were there for peak periods. They are not. They are running constantly. They are emitting methane and GHGs. This needs to stop. The energy mix can, obviously, for baseline energy, includes some small nuclear, but it has got to, the real investments have got to be made into our renewable energy sources. Again, if we do it, it is better for the economy. We have seen in other provinces who have invested deeply in renewable energy that the investment comes, that it boosts their economy, that they have good green jobs, and it is the way of the future. Any nuclear, there can be no new nuclear plants. We have to look at small modular, but outside of that, it has got to be renewable.
Okay, we have a couple of questions about drugs and supervised injection sites and safe supply. And I will go with Catherine, Thomas, Simon on the first one. The first one is about supervised injection sites. And the question is, what should be done to allow and maintain safe injection sites and determine where they should be located?
Mm-hmm. So when the consumption and treatment centers, because they do treatment as well as consumption, and they are part of healthcare. They are there to keep people alive. And when we made the decision as a Board of Health, I sat on the Public Health Board at the time, it was in areas where there was a growing an increase of people dying of overdoses and people who were using drugs. So we know where the consumption sites need to go. They need to go where they are now. The fact that Doug Ford is closing down Somerset West Community Health Centre will mean that people will overdose. It will mean that people are losing health care to keep them alive until we can get them housing. People need housing. It's the key support that people need. And if you are concerned about the lack of health care, paramedics, responding to overdoses, and then taking people to emergency rooms when it should be happening within the centers that are already established in the areas that we know are where the activity is happening.
And Thomas?
I think that Catherine's correct here. that the Ford government, for whatever wisdom they had, decided to close these safe consumption sites without actually thinking about the people that it is actually impacting. And at the end of this month, Somerset Community Centre will have their safe consumption site closed, and I guarantee you, unfortunately, that come March and April, we are going to see a spike in overdose and usage to our emergency rooms as a result. People will die. This is a fact. But this issue, I think we need to make sure that we are balancing both the needs of our most vulnerable, the need for harm reduction strategies with community safety, and ensure that those neighbors who live around these community safe consumption sites are also being heard as well, because there have been some considerable concerns around these facilities, and I think we need to make sure that those people are also being listened to when this issue comes up.
Simon Beckett.
So, yeah, there it is. Okay. So, yes, this is another area that we're going to agree upon, that these safe injection sites and safe consumption sites should be opened and operable. Closing them down is, of course, going to cost lives. I think we can all agree with that. One of the things that I think we're missing out here as well is we're not taking these people and moving into a completely different area. They're taking them off the localized streets, with Catherine did mention, and we're giving them a place, because I walk downtown and along Rideau, and before there was a safe injection site or safe consumption site, I would see people out on the street actively shooting up. And where do those needles go? They go right there. So from a safety standpoint for our people, residents who live in the riding for children, this is where we need to get these individuals, is out of the eyes of the public, not allowing crack pipes and needles to be left on the street. That's what the safe consumption sites are for. They help control. When we have a little more control over the situation, now we can add the additional layers of support. We can get these people the supports they need, such as addiction services. Greens, we're looking to add, and probably multiples of the treatment beds that are available. That's the one thing the current Ford government has not done, is expand the beds for treatment services. And as Greens, we're going to drastically increase those beds, so when people are ready to get better, we have the ability to help them.
So the next question, similar subject, but it's about safer supply. And I'll go Simon, Thomas, Catherine on this. Do you think there are adequate requirements and protocols around safer supply to make sure that drugs are not being diverted into the people who have not been prescribed them? And if you think that the protocols aren't adequate, what would you do?
Yeah, this is a really great question. I've actually heard quite a lot from residents within the Westboro areas regarding this issue, that there's one clinic in particular, I'm not going to name names, nor do I exactly remember where it is, that individuals are going and getting prescribed narcotics and then going out and selling them. And that is a huge issue, because this is now continuing to support the black market and has potential to get into the hands of our youth, and that's where we lose them. So no, there is not enough regulation around this. We do need additional regulation and oversight. The exact measures and the exact policies around that, I'm going to be honest, I don't have the exact answers. I'm not an expert in that field, but that's where we do need to go back to the drawing board, bring in the experts, and rely on the facts. Not just feelings, but the facts that these individuals are able to provide to us, and build our policies around that. Yes, this is a good policy to be able to provide a safe supply, but we need to ensure it's staying, again, in control, so that we can control the narrative around it and it's not getting back into the black market.
Thomas Simpson, do we need more rules around safer supply?
Yeah, absolutely. So as Simon was saying, in Hintonburg, there is a location where people are going and they're getting access to narcotics, and they're being preyed upon as a result. This is a legislative gray zone that has been created, and I think needs to be addressed immediately, and something that I have said that I would advocate for, to ensure that when we're prescribing safer supply, that we're mandatorily offering wraparound supports that go with harm reduction strategies. So this includes evidence-based treatments, integrated supports as well, like counseling and employment readiness. We can't just keep giving people safer supply and hoping that things will get better. We need to ensure that the wraparound supports are there to catch them where they're at and ensure that we can help them on their journey so that they can thrive once again.
Catherine McKenney, more rules around safer supply?
So there was the issue of the clinic in Hintonburg. It was a private clinic. People would walk in, they would talk to a screen, which was a doctor, get their drugs and walk out, and they were being preyed upon. What we have in addition to that, we have what's called Safer Supply Ottawa, and it is a group of pharmacists, a group of doctors who have worked together, who have come together to design a program that also wraps supports. But the most important support that is wrapped around people is housing. When people get housing, they are able to they're able to manage how they take their drugs. But the other thing I have to say about Safer Supply is that our government agencies have not kept up with the need. So as our drug supply becomes more and more toxic, we continue to give out low-dose drugs. That doesn't work. It doesn't work for people. I have met people who have been on Safer Supply, have gotten housing, and are thriving today. We can do it, but we have to have we have to know what the answer is, and we have to be courageous enough to do it.
Let's talk about paying for the province that we want. Let's talk about fiscal responsibility. There's a question that's come in from someone who's been listening to you. I'll go with Thomas, Catherine, Simon on this. And the question is, we hear about what you'd spend on housing, on healthcare, on other services. Where will the revenue come from?
I think it starts by taking a look at the terrible deals that Doug Ford has gotten us into, to be quite honest. He's committed us to $60 billion for a fantasy tunnel under the 401. He's made sure that we're spending billions more dollars by having beer and alcohol in our corner stores. Within the first 100 days, we were very clear. We're going to take a look at these shady backroom deals, make sure whatever improprieties are fixed, and cancel those deals. It includes making sure that we're canceling these satellites with Elon Musk, and make sure that we're canceling this fantasy idea of creating a spa at Ontario Place. This is all money that's helping his buddies and not us. So we're going to start by making sure that we're taking back those terrible contracts, that we're saving money and using those savings to fund the things that matter most, ensuring that we have affordable housing for everyone, ensuring that we're getting a family doctor for the 2.5 million Ontarians who don't have one, and finally ensuring that we can double ODSP rates and remove people from legislative property.
Catherine McKenney, where does the money come from for the things that you want to do?
Well, let's talk about healthcare and housing. Like right now, we have got privatized healthcare that is growing. We are paying nurses in private centers double what our nurses are making in hospitals and in our community health centers. So budgets are about priorities, and it matters where you're spending your money. So at the very least, we would move away from privatized healthcare and make sure that our emergency rooms, those wait times come down, that we make sure that we've got the healthcare that people need that's affordable. And on housing, costs $45,000 to $50,000 to keep someone in a shelter, and we've got 3,000 people sleeping in a shelter tonight. You know, it costs about $12,000 to keep someone housed. So right there, across this province, we've got 80,000 people who are unhoused. Just that alone would be enough money to build the housing we need, to keep people housed, and to make them more productive. It would save money from our healthcare system and our justice system, and it's the right thing to do. Housing is a human right, and we have got to get this right.
Simon?
So let's talk some real numbers, because both these individuals are not really getting down, in my opinion, to the bread and butter of how are we actually going to increase revenues. Because at the end of the day, there is room for retooling how we are spending our money. Absolutely. There are efficiencies to be found, and there are priorities that I think we all do align with. For example, $10 billion to cancel the unnecessary 413. That's a huge savings right there. But in reality, to pay for a lot of the promises that all three parties are promising, we do need additional revenue. That is the reality. So as Greens, we are proposing for the 1%, essentially, the highest income earners in Ontario, to pay their fair share, to pay a little bit more, so that the individuals at the lower end can save money, and we can reduce taxes for them. We're calling to reduce taxes for those individuals making under $65,000 and households under $10,000. But we can go further. We need our biggest emitters, oil and gas, to pay their fair share for the cost of polluting our economy or are polluting our province so that we continue to fund our transition to a green economy. We can keep going. We can get companies like Enbridge Gas to pay for the rent that they are taking up space to have their utilities delivered to us. We're one of the only provinces that doesn't charge utility companies to use the land to deliver their products.
In part because I have a follow-on question, and I'll put it to you folks in the same order. So Thomas, Catherine, Simon. Philosophically, is it important to you that we balance the budget in this province?
I think we, as a society, want to make sure that we're balancing our own budgets at home, because that's how we live best. And I think that's what we expect from governments as well. I think perhaps we've oversimplified how we budget as a government. There are capital expenditures, there are operating costs, and these two are not always the same, because they certainly can't be. You know, having capital expenditures over a lifetime means different things than operating over year. I think what we need to do is actually have a better understanding of what budgeting looks like in our province first, and then have it and ensure that we have appropriate means to actually bring down our deficit to make sure that we are spending within our means so that our most vulnerable can get what they need, that people have a more affordable life, but we're not passing the buck on to future generations to fund that.
Catherine, is a balanced budget important to you?
So cities have got to balance their budgets, and we see what happens in our cities as things deteriorate because we're not able to run a deficit. So a balanced budget is, aspirational, sure, but is it something that we should do on the backs of our municipalities? No. Is it something that we should do not to ensure that we have good health care, that we're funding our schools properly, that we're building for the future? I mean, there's always the joke that future taxpayers are always the most generous. But we also have to make sure that we are investing in the things that we need today to build out for tomorrow. We need to invest in our schools. We need to invest in post-secondary. We need to invest in housing. We need to invest in the infrastructure that we need for a good, healthy economy. So I would say that it is not a necessary,
Simon?
I'm going to give two answers, short and a long. In the short term, no. We have a lot of priorities to pay for. We have a lot of goals. I think that's shared amongst all three of us up here. But in the long term, absolutely. We can't continue to spend at the rate we are because it will be a detriment to the future of this province. Yes, municipalities cannot run deficits, and we do need to support them. But continued spending, continued deficit growth is not something that costs money to be able to maintain the growth of that deficit. That money can be better used to continue to support the individuals that we are all up here looking to support. So in the long term, we absolutely do need to balance the budget and pay it down. Do we need zero? No. Having a bit of a debt is not necessarily a bad thing. But we cannot continue to drastically increase the budgets that and the deficit that we've seen under Doug Ford and previous Liberal governments. It's not something I'm confident that a new Liberal government will be able to control either.
So I think we have time for two more if we're quick. Est-ce que vous parlez français? And if not, what would you do to represent your French-speaking potential constituents? Catherine, Thomas, Simon.
Thank you for that. No, I am not bilingual. I was at one time in my life. When I graduated from University of Ottawa, I had to have proficiency, but I was a single parent at the time, and I was not able to keep that up. But in terms of representing Francophone constituents, I have done it. I've done it in Somerset Ward. We make sure that everything that we do is bilingual. I support Francophone services very strongly. I support having good French schools, Francophone schools. So I understand the needs, and I would continue to work with the Francophone community.
Thomas, in 30 seconds, actually, if you could, so we can get him in.
Oh, good. Merci. Je comprends le français, I don't speak it very well, I'll put it that way. And my husband, who is French, gripes about it all the time. I'm trying my best. J'ai essayé, I think. I would commit to trying to ensure that my French is better, but I agree with Catherine that we need to ensure that our services here in Ottawa Centre are bilingual. As someone who has run a national employment program, I've always ensured that our services are offered in both official languages to ensure that those services are offered in the cultural competency of those who need it. And that's exactly what you can expect as your next MPP, to ensure that the information that's provided is always provided in both official languages.
And Simon.
I will keep it quick in the essence of time because I think we're time sensitive here. No, I do not speak French. It's definitely something that long term I would and should learn. But at the end of the day, as a representative for Ottawa Centre, I'm here to represent all residents within the riding, which means respecting the French residents, providing services in both official languages, as well as listening to their concerns. There's a lot of them. I've been responding to them recently about not inadequate funding for French schools within our riding, and that is one of the issues that I want to address so that the equity between English and French speakers is met.
Thank you. And we haven't talked about education so far, and I'm going to ask a narrow question to keep it focused. And it's about the e-learning credit that the province has begun requiring in high school. Simon, Catherine, Thomas, keep the e-learning credit, scrap it, change it? What do you think?
We're quite clear, this needs to be scrapped. It's not necessary to become a competent member of society. It's not something that is necessarily required in every single field. Should we allow the option for students to take it? Sure, absolutely. But as a requirement, not a chance.
Catherine?
I'm just going to largely agree with Simon.
Okay, and Thomas?
Yes, same.
Gosh, I got to find another question then. Should have prepared that better. Okay, what this might be stealing a bit from the upcoming closings, but Thomas, Simon, Catherine, you've got three progressives up there on the riser together, generally speaking. What's one topic or issue that you think really distinguishes you from the rest of the field?
Great question. I think what we have in front of us is a very important election. We've had 7 years of a government who I really don't think has listened to us, who has ignored Ottawa, and has not ensured that our priorities are the province's priorities. I think we're at a moment in time where we need to ensure that our politics is inclusive as possible. And that means ensuring that younger generations of leaders can be part of that we can bring new ideas forward, and that we can create and improve upon our current problems with new solutions. I think that's what I can bring as your next MPP, is not only my energy. I don't know if some of you have seen me, but I have literally been running door to door in this weather, mostly to stay warm, but also because I want to try and meet with as many people as possible. But I have under my belt over 12 years of experience of getting results for people, getting results for our most vulnerable, people with disabilities, understanding how government works, improving and strengthening legislation and programs. That's what you can get if you vote for me as your next MPP.
Catherine, what's one issue that distinguishes you from the others on the stage?
Well, I would say that it is my experience. I have deep roots in this community. I have experience as an elected official. I've stood up for this community. I've worked with this community. I know many people in it, and I understand the issues of concern in Ottawa Centre. And I also am very energetic. I actually run ultra marathons, so there's no one, I don't think, you could beat me in a short race, but I'll probably pass you at about 30 kilometers.
And Simon, what's one issue that distinguishes you from the other two?
And I'm going to elect to use my extra time right now, if that's still allowed.
Okay, you just did, I'm afraid.
So it's very clearly the environment. I'll be completely honest. As much as one of the things I've been trying to talk about a lot during this election is the fact that Greens are not only an environmental policy party, but we have policies on mental health, on housing, on healthcare, on education. Actually, we have in my opinion, the most robust housing policy, because ours is 10 pages long, in a platform that we released that's fully costed. I challenge my two colleagues up here to present a platform. There is none. The Liberals in particular have 8 announcements. That's their platform. You need a leader who's going to stand up for your community, who is taking a holistic approach at everything, because everything is interconnected. Housing to healthcare, healthcare to education, education to the economy, and so on and so forth. So as Greens, we look at not just a one-to-one, but the big picture. And the environment and sustainability as a whole, financial sustainability, sustainability of government, sustainability of a populace is at our core. And this is the biggest difference between what we as Greens are championing and what we believe in compared to the other parties, and why we are truly a grassroots organization who stand up for you, not the party, not the leader, but you.
So you each get 90 seconds to bring it home. Catherine, Simon, Thomas, same order you started. Wrap it up.
Well, thank you. So over the years, I have fought for real change, standing up for our communities when it actually mattered the most, whether it was pushing for a public inquiry into Ottawa's failed LRT system, pushing to declare a housing and homelessness emergency here in Ottawa, or standing firm against a trucker convoy. I have never, ever shied away from tough fights. And now, Ontarians, you are facing crisis after crisis, a healthcare system in turmoil, a housing market that's out of control, and skyrocketing costs that are making it harder for people to get by. But these are not problems without solutions. We can actually guarantee access to a family doctor. We can cut emergency room waits. We can invest in our hospitals. We can build thousands of truly permanently affordable homes and bring back rent and vacancy control so renters have stability. We can strengthen public transit by securing long overdue provincial operational funding. And we can maintain and invest in our kids by ensuring small class sizes, better maintained schools, and the resources that support staff need to do their jobs. I know how to get results, and I know that real progress happens when we work together, when our cities and our province are partners and not adversaries. That's the kind of leadership I will bring on your behalf to Queen's Park. Thank you.
Simon Beckett, 90 seconds to close.
We've seen years and years of back and forth, liberal, conservative, and we are getting the same results. We've also seen years of an ineffective opposition that's unwilling to work with government to get things done for the constituents they've been elected to represent. It's time for something different. It's time for an elected representative and a party who truly cares about its constituents. It's time to elect somebody who is looking at the big picture and not just the individual problem. That's not in the hands or the pockets of corporations or the unions, but is truly there for the people and willing to represent the individual for the greater good. It's time to consider voting differently, and it's time to consider voting green.
And Thomas Simpson, 90 seconds.
Well, again, I want to thank all of the community associations who have organized this tonight. David, thank you so much for moderating. But most importantly, thank you all for coming out on this cold and snowy, what day is it? Thursday? Thursday night. I don't know what day it is anymore. This is Democracy in Action, and thank you all so much. I want to leave you tonight by thinking one important question. Are you better off now than you were 7 years ago? Because I can tell you the answer is probably no. Because our healthcare system is at a crisis. Because 2.5 million Ontarians don't have a family doctor. Because life is more unaffordable, and all we seem to get are $200 bribes. Because our green belt is being sold off, and the only priorities this premier seems to have is making sure that his buddies get more money. We have not been thought of. Our most vulnerable certainly have not, and it is time for change. When we elect Liberal MPPs in this city, we get progress. Our universities and hospitals are all because of the Liberal MPPs that we have had and the investment that they have brought to this city. So I'm asking you tonight to consider voting for me, for real new leadership. What's my slogan? It's been a week. For new leadership and real action. To make sure that your priorities are our province's priorities, because that's what we deserve, and that's what we have not had in the last 7 years. I want to thank you all again so much for tonight, for your time. I'm really happy to answer any questions that you have after this. Thank you again for joining us.
Folks, just running for office is incredibly hard work. It is a huge commitment. The hours that these people are putting in to fight for what they believe in and to try to represent all of us, including me, at Queen's Park.